3 weeks ago, I got a phone call that changed everything I thought I knew about laziness. My neighbor's 28-year-old daughter, Emma, had locked herself in her apartment for 6 days straight, wouldn't answer the door, wouldn't return calls, hadn't shown up to her dream job at the art gallery she'd worked 5 years to get. Everyone was whispering the same thing. Emma's always been lazy. This was bound to happen. But when I finally convinced her to let me in, what I found wasn't laziness at all. It was something far more sinister that's been masquerading as laziness for decades, destroying lives and dreams in plain sight. What I discovered that day will shock you, because chances are, it's been silently sabotaging your life too. Before I tell you what I found in Emma's apartment that changed everything, let me ask you something. Have you ever had days where you sit at your desk, knowing exactly what you need to do, but your body refuses to move? Where you feel like you're watching yourself from outside, screaming at yourself to just get started, but nothing happens? If this sounds familiar, stick around, because what I'm about to share isn't just going to change how you see laziness. It's going to change how you see yourself. And hey, if this story helps you the way it helped Emma, consider hitting that subscribe button. More life-changing stories from Grandma's kitchen are coming your way. The call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Emma's mother, Patricia, was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. "She won't come out, Mrs. Thompson. It's been 6 days. I think she's having some kind of breakdown. Everyone says she's just being lazy again, but this feels different." Patricia and I had been neighbors for 15 years. I'd watched Emma grow from a creative, energetic teenager into a young woman who seemed to constantly battle invisible demons. Throughout high school, teachers complained she wouldn't turn in assignments despite clearly understanding the material. In college, she'd disappear for weeks during finals, only to resurface with elaborate apologies about being too lazy to study. But I'd seen something others missed. Emma wasn't lazy during our Saturday afternoon tea sessions. She'd arrive with homemade cookies, detailed stories about art exhibitions she'd discovered, and questions about life that showed a deeply thoughtful mind. The girl who was supposedly too lazy to function was somehow finding energy to research obscure artists, bake complex recipes, and maintain meaningful conversations for hours. Something wasn't adding up, but it took that terrifying phone call to finally piece together the truth. When I arrived at Emma's apartment, what I saw through the window made my blood run cold. This vibrant young woman was sitting motionless on her couch, staring at a blank canvas that had been set up for weeks. Her dream project, a series of paintings for her first solo exhibition, remained untouched. But here's what chilled me to the bone. Emma wasn't relaxing. She wasn't being lazy. She was trapped. Her eyes held a terror I'd seen before but never understood until that moment. It was the same look I'd glimpsed in my grandson Tommy 20 years earlier, the same expression I'd caught on my own face in mirrors during the hardest periods of my life. Emma wasn't choosing to be unproductive. Something was holding her prisoner, and she didn't even know what it was. What happened next would unravel everything I thought I knew about human motivation. Getting Emma to open that door took 3 hours of gentle coaxing. When she finally let me in, I barely recognized the confident young woman I'd known. She was wearing the same clothes from a week ago, her apartment was in chaos, and she kept apologizing for being such a lazy failure. But then she said something that made my heart stop. "Grandma Thompson, I want to paint. I dream about painting. I wake up excited to create, but when I walk to the easel, it's like hitting an invisible wall. My body just stops. Everyone thinks I'm lazy, but I swear I'm not choosing this. It's like something else is controlling me." That's when I recognized what was really happening. Emma wasn't lazy. She was experiencing something psychologists now call task paralysis, but which I'd lived through myself 50 years earlier without knowing it had a name. Let me tell you about the summer of 1973, when I nearly lost everything, because nobody understood what was really happening to me. I was 35, recently divorced, trying to raise 3 children while starting my own seamstress business. From the outside, I looked like I had it all together. But inside, something was breaking down. I'd sit at my sewing machine for hours, unable to start even the simplest alterations. I'd stare at fabric knowing exactly what to do, but my hands wouldn't move. My sister called me lazy. My mother suggested I lacked discipline. Even I believed something was fundamentally wrong with my character. The shame was suffocating, but the paralysis was worse. I wasn't choosing to be unproductive. I was trapped by something I couldn't name or understand. Then one day, my neighbor Mrs. Chen knocked on my door. She'd immigrated from Taiwan and had a different perspective on struggle. Instead of lecturing me about laziness, she asked a question that changed my life. What are you afraid will happen if you succeed? The answer came flooding out before I could stop it. I was terrified that if I succeeded at my business, I'd become like my workaholic father, who'd missed every important moment of my childhood. I was scared that success would turn me into someone I didn't want to be. My brain had created an invisible prison to protect me from a future I feared more than failure. This wasn't laziness. It was my mind's twisted way of keeping me safe. Here's what nobody talks about. Millions of people are walking around thinking they're lazy when they're actually experiencing sophisticated psychological protection mechanism. Your brain is so intelligent that it will sabotage your conscious goals to protect you from perceived threats, even threats that don't make logical sense. Emma's story gets even more shocking. As we talked that night, she revealed that her laziness always got worse before important opportunities. Right before her college graduation, she couldn't finish her final project for 2 weeks. Before job interviews, she'd become mysteriously unable to prepare. Before her first gallery showing, she'd locked herself away. Her brain had learned that achievement led to pressure, pressure led to criticism, and criticism felt life-threatening. So it developed an ingenious solution: shut down before success could create danger. Emma's laziness was actually her mind's attempt to save her life. But here's where this story takes an even darker turn. Emma wasn't unique. Over the next month, I started paying closer attention to people in my community who were labeled lazy. What I discovered was horrifying. My mailman Jerry, who everyone thought was unmotivated because he never pursued promotions, revealed he was terrified of authority after growing up with an abusive father. His laziness was trauma protection. Sarah from the grocery store, who seemed to lack ambition, was actually paralyzed by perfectionism. She'd rather do nothing than risk doing something imperfectly. David, the teenager down the street who wouldn't do homework, wasn't lazy. He had undiagnosed ADHD and had been shamed for his differences so many times that his brain shut down to avoid more failure. The pattern was everywhere once I knew how to look. People weren't lazy, they were scared, traumatized, overwhelmed, or neurologically different. But society had convinced them that their struggles were character flaws, instead of human experiences that needed understanding and support. After discovering what was really happening with Emma, I decided to conduct an experiment. I gathered 5 people from my community who'd been labeled lazy and invited them to my kitchen every Tuesday evening. I didn't call it therapy or intervention, just tea and conversation. But I had a secret agenda. Instead of focusing on their productivity problems, I started asking different questions. Not why won't you do the work, but what happens in your body when you think about starting. Not why are you so unmotivated, but when did you first learn that achievement was dangerous? The results were extraordinary. Margaret, a single mother who seemed perpetually behind on everything, discovered her laziness was actually chronic exhaustion from carrying the mental load of her entire family's needs. She wasn't lazy, she was depleted. Roberto, a talented musician who couldn't finish songs, realized his creative blocks started after his father told him art was a waste of time for real men. His brain was protecting him from paternal rejection. Linda, who procrastinated on everything important, uncovered that her delays were attempts to control timing in a life that had felt chaotic since childhood trauma. Each person's laziness told a story of protection, survival, and adaptation. None of them were actually lazy. They were all responding intelligently to circumstances that had taught them productivity was dangerous. But here's the most shocking discovery. Once we identified what was really happening, everything changed rapidly. Within 6 weeks, all 5 people had transformed their relationships with work and motivation, not through willpower or discipline, but through understanding and compassion. The breakthrough came when I realized that laziness, as we commonly understand it, barely exists. What we call laziness is usually one of 7 hidden conditions, masquerading as a character flaw. Trauma protection. Your brain associates productivity with past danger and shuts you down to keep you safe. Executive dysfunction. Your brain's starter motor doesn't work properly, often due to ADHD, depression, or anxiety. Chronic overload. You're operating beyond your capacity and your system is forcing rest to prevent breakdown. Perfectionism paralysis. Fear of imperfection creates complete inaction. Misaligned values. You're trying to force yourself to care about things that don't actually matter to you. Unprocessed grief. Loss or disappointment has depleted your motivational reserve. Neurological differences. Your brain works differently than expected, but society hasn't taught you how to work with your unique wiring. Emma had a combination of trauma protection and perfectionism, paralysis. Once we identified this, she could start addressing the real issues instead of fighting the symptoms. The transformation was remarkable. Within 3 weeks, Emma was painting again, not because she'd overcome laziness, but because she'd stopped being afraid of her own success. She'd learned to recognize when her brain was trying to protect her and could choose different responses. Based on what worked for Emma and the others, I developed a simple protocol that's helped dozens of people break free from the laziness trap. It takes 72 hours and requires no willpower, just curiosity and gentleness. Hour 124, the truth inventory. Instead of judging yourself for being lazy, spend 1 day documenting what actually happens when you try to be productive. Write down physical sensations, emotions, and thoughts without judgment. Most people discover they're not lazy, they're afraid, overwhelmed, or fighting their brain's natural rhythms. Hour 25:48, the story investigation. Ask yourself, when did I first learn that productivity was dangerous? What bad things happened when I achieved goals in the past? What am I afraid will happen if I succeed? Emma discovered her fear of success stemmed from watching her mother sacrifice her health for career achievement. Hour 49:72, the gentle experiment. Choose the smallest possible productive action, something so tiny it feels almost silly. Not to prove you're not lazy, but to gather information about what your system needs to feel safe. Emma started by mixing 1 color of paint for 5 minutes. That's it. The results are usually immediate. People realize they're not broken or lazy. They just needed to understand their own internal logic. As I finish this story, I want to share something I wrote to Emma after her breakthrough, but which I really wish I could have given to my 35-year-old self sitting paralyzed at that sewing machine. Dear one, you are not lazy. You have never been lazy. Your brain is so sophisticated that it creates elaborate protection systems to keep you safe from perceived threats. The part of you that stops working isn't broken, it's trying to save you. Your laziness might be your trauma speaking, your ADHD brain needing different strategies, your perfectionist heart afraid of judgment, or your depleted spirit begging for rest. None of these are character flaws. All of them are human experiences that deserve compassion, not criticism. You don't need more discipline. You need more understanding. You don't need to push harder. You need to listen deeper. You don't need to fix your laziness. You need to decode what your brilliant, protective brain is trying to tell you. The world will try to convince you that rest is weakness, that struggle means failure, that needing help makes you defective. But I've lived long enough to know that the people who honor their limits, work with their natural rhythms, and ask for support when needed, these people don't just survive, they thrive. So tonight, instead of calling yourself lazy, try saying this: I'm human, and my brain is trying to protect me. Let me figure out what it's afraid of so we can move forward together. Emma is now preparing for her third solo exhibition, not because she overcame laziness, but because she stopped believing she was lazy in the first place. The paintings she creates from this place of self-understanding are more beautiful than anything she made while fighting herself. Your story can have the same ending. It starts with understanding that you were never the problem. You were always the solution waiting to be discovered. And remember, sweet souls, if this story helped you see yourself differently, there are more life-changing conversations happening right here. Subscribe to join our family, because everyone deserves to know they're not broken, they're just beautifully, mysteriously human. Sweet dreams, and remember, Grandma believes in you, especially when you can't believe in yourself.